You won't believe it, but 2,000 years ago, farmers invented a system that changed irrigation forever. Thanks to it, farmers only needed to fill the clay pot once every 7 days to maintain the plant's growing season. And the most amazing thing is that they tried to hide this technology from ordinary people for thousands of years. After all, practically nothing was needed for its successful operation. No pumps, electricity, or especially daily work in the garden were required. The only thing needed was ceramics and a little understanding of how physics works. Due to its effectiveness and simplicity, this method quickly spread across countries and very quickly filled the entire world, especially after Persian engineers took over and improved it several times. Then the Native Americans, like other peoples, made their own adjustments to it. For example, early American settlers used this system to survive the droughts that were then aggressively destroying farms. But the happiness did not last long, only until the moment when, in the 60s, this method began to be very carefully hidden, after which he disappeared completely. When modern drip irrigation systems came onto the market, the buried jug method slowly began to disappear. First, farmers abandoned it, and then they stopped talking about it in textbooks altogether. But all this happened so quickly that at that moment, no one had time to realize that the elites had deliberately decided to hide this from the farmers. Therefore, people abandoned this method not because it was ineffective, and only because the overall business model of this method had one major drawback. You won't believe it, but all it took was purchasing the necessary equipment just once. People have been led to believe that modern irrigation methods require complex infrastructure, ongoing maintenance contracts, and technical expertise. But that is far from true, except that, what if I tell you that the most efficient irrigation system ever developed in the world? Will it cost you less than a meal at the most basic restaurant? Plus, it won't require any electricity from you, and the more you do nothing with it, the better the results will be. This ancient technology threatened to make an industry worth over $8 billion obsolete. So stick around until the end to avoid missing anything. The first mention of this technology was in a Chinese agricultural manual called Fan Sheng Xi Shu. It was compiled more than 2,000 years ago, during the Han Dynasty. And, to my great surprise, even then the instructions were extremely specific, which was quite surprising. It was necessary to make 530 holes per hectare, after which it was necessary to bury a 6-liter clay jug in the center of each hole. The level of the neck of the jug should be level with the ground, after which the jug should be filled with water. The text doesn't explain to us why it works this way, but nevertheless it documents that this is how it should be. Throughout ancient China, farmers carefully followed these instructions and passed them down through generations. And all this was not because they understood capillary physics, but only because the harvest each season proved the true effectiveness of this method. The jugs worked in such a way that they could easily water crops even in the driest months. In addition, they managed to reduce their labor costs to 1 replenishment per week, which is a very good result even in our time. But that's not all. They were able to prevent diseases that arose due to surface moisture. So it's not hard to guess that this was far from just a Chinese secret. Local farmers were so pleased with this success that they told tourists from other countries about their method. This is why this technique was passed from hand to hand very quickly, especially through the Mediterranean. Thus, Persian engineers were among the first to master it, and were able to adapt this technology to their dry climate. Archaeological evidence has proven the presence of buried irrigation vessels throughout ancient Mesopotamia. In early America, before Columbus visited, the native people also developed a complex network of buried pots. They made it possible to maintain agriculture in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Imagine the surprise of the Spanish colonists in 1500 when they discovered that local farmers were not struggling to survive. Then they found irrigation systems that supported the population for thousands of years without modern technology. At that time, it was not something supernatural, and the buried jug became a standard practice. But why did people stop using it if the technology was so perfect? It's all about the science behind the method, which is extremely simple. This method is based on a force called soil moisture tension. Unglazed terracotta clay is porous, so at a microscopic level the wall of the pot is a semi-permeable membrane, and when you bury it and fill it with water, this creates a hydraulic system that operates on demand. And now the most critical mechanism. When the soil around the jug is dry, the moisture tension increases, and this pressure already draws water through the clay walls. And when the system is completely wetted by rain, seepage stops completely and the system begins to self-regulate. It responds to the actual needs of the plant, not to human preferences and guesses that may turn out to be incorrect. Plant roots quickly understand what is required of them, so if you quickly dig up a buried jug after the growing season, you can be quite surprised at the huge, dense carpet of roots that will form around the clay surface. Plants obtain irrigation by actively extracting it through root pressure. In essence, this is the only irrigation system in the world that adapts to the weather and time of day. The most amazing thing is that she doesn't need any gadget or microchip for this. The effectiveness of this method has been proven hundreds of times. For example, David Bainbridge decided to conduct his own research, which confirmed in quantity that farmers have known about this for thousands of years. Irrigation using buried clay jars has been shown to increase water use efficiency by 70% compared to traditional surface irrigation. The University of Arizona also did not remain idle and confirmed these findings with its own tests. It was found that in sandy soils with high drainage, water savings reached 70% compared to surface irrigation. In addition, since in this method water is supplied below the surface, evaporation losses are minimal, if not zero. But the most astonishing footage came from a study in India that measured weed pressure. It's no secret that weeds require surface water to germinate. Therefore, in fields where surface irrigation was used, the researchers measured 465 kilograms of weed biomass per hectare. And now think about it. In the areas where the jugs were buried, only 62 kilograms of weeds were removed. The whole point is that surface irrigation feeds weeds while subsurface delivery only feeds the crop. From this, we can conclude that by all the most objective metrics such as water conservation, weed suppression, and crop yield, the ancient jug wins hands down. But that was the main problem. The fact is that in the 60s, the world experienced an economic shift that had nothing to do with science. Drip irrigation emerged as a result of Israeli research, which was an innovative technology at the time. Plastic tubing with precision emitters was used, but unlike clay pots, drip irrigation had its own business model. After all, these systems required installation and maintenance, since filters need to be changed regularly, just like emitters. And although the tubes were destroyed by direct exposure to the sun, it was still worth understanding that the system also worked quite well. This made it possible to attract investment into this project and open new sources of income. For example, thanks to this method, the world saw such large companies as Rainbird and Toro, which thanks to this method were able to build multi-billion-dollar empires. And now, in our time, the drip irrigation market is valued at almost $10 billion. But the most interesting thing is something completely different. For example, it is worth estimating the costs, since a basic drip irrigation kit for a home garden costs between $200 and $700. This is even if we don't go into too much detail, but select the most necessary things such as pipes, a timer, a pressure regulator, and other tools. But the paradox is that if you use a simple buried clay jug, which costs about $5 or $10, then nothing else is needed. These will be the most basic expenses because the jug is purchased only once and does not require any filters for cleaning, and it does not clog. So, essentially, all you need to do is plant the jug in the ground, and only do it once. You won't even need any electricity to supply water. Manufacturers and global elites long ago realized that this was a dead end, and that such a business model would be completely unprofitable, so they immediately began to impose modern irrigation methods. After all, if you use an old and proven product, then after the buyer buys it once, he will not come back again. This is why a massive advertising campaign was launched to make the drip irrigation system the only gold standard. At universities, students also began to be told that irrigation with buried jugs using the old method was nothing less than sheer savagery. Those who used the old method were ridiculed, because now only one thing has become popular: drip irrigation. It's really understandable for manufacturers because if you sell your product only once, you won't find that many buyers and won't be able to make a huge fortune from it. That's why you might have noticed that even when you buy something for the garden, you might notice how it can quickly break over time. Although just 10 years ago, the exact same thing could have served you for almost a lifetime. Nowadays, people have been fed the theory that restoring such technology is absolutely absurd. And what's more, many no longer even know about such an ancient method. Now let's tell you how to do this at home. It's as simple as it gets, and the whole process starts with a vessel. Simply put, you'll need plain unglazed terracotta, which you can find in any yard. Remember, it is extremely important to avoid glazed ceramics because the glaze seals the pores very quickly, and the system is designed to allow the clay to breathe. Once you have your pot, all you need to do is plug the drainage hole. A wine cork, firmly inserted into the bottom, works perfectly for this. It will work perfectly, just add a little more food-grade silicone. The main goal is to create a waterproof bottom with porous walls, after which it should be placed back into the ground. Be sure to bury the pot up to the neck, leaving the rim slightly above the soil level to ensure that no dirt gets inside. Then it is worth tightly filling the soil around the pot, because this contact will be almost key for the tension to work. After that, the last nuance remains, in which it is worth covering the hole with a suitable saucer or flat stone in order to stop evaporation. Congratulations, what you've just built is a new sensor-based irrigation system that operates without electricity or maintenance costs. All you need to do now is fill it with water and plant your plants around the perimeter and walk away. Now, a 1-liter jug can easily water a circle with a diameter of 2 or 3 feet. You also don't have to worry about other plants. For example, tomatoes and melons will be able to find this irrigation source within a few days. The best part is that you only have to work once a week to fill the jug with water. If the summer heat hits and temperatures become extremely high, no problem. Filling with water once a week will be more than enough. And if you think it's too little, no problem. Just add more water at your discretion, as much as you like. It won't be a problem because it's simply impossible to overfill. The beauty is that the soil will never take more than it needs. The disappearance of buried jar irrigation from modern agriculture is an example of how multi-billion-dollar corporations have trained us to make repeat purchases, as they have no interest in your garden running smoothly, without constant expenses and complex mechanisms. It's important to understand that drip irrigation is also a good technology, essential for industrial monocultures grown on a massive scale. This is where scale is far more important than simplicity. But if you're a keen gardener, like about 90% of the population, and you simply want to enjoy life-growing food without struggling with your equipment, then this age-old method is perfect for you. The knowledge wasn't lost, it was simply hidden from us by multi-billion-dollar companies that benefit from it, which is not at all profitable for an industry that hasn't been able to monetize such knowledge. It's worth understanding that clay pots don't care about market dynamics, patent protection, or global crises. They'll do their job just as well as they did 2,000 years ago. All you need to do is simply bury them in the ground and wait for the physics and biological processes to start on their own. It's as simple as it gets, and you really do have a choice. Invest in a system that makes money for multi-billion-dollar corporations, or just buy a clay pot and feed your garden. Our ancestors already created the most understandable instructions for us back then, because the best technology is the one that requires the least intervention and brings the greatest results. The best part is that this knowledge hasn't been lost, and you can use it, at least for comparison. How you choose to apply this technique is entirely up to you, so if you found it useful and want to learn even more useful information about plants and ancient technologies they tried to hide from us, then be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing.